We have this interesting spectacle where John Boehner is invested in at least 7 companies that will see their stock go up and see his wealth go up if the Keystone XL pipeline is approved. Why is that an okay thing in American politics? Brian Baird, Congressman Brian Baird of Washington State, discovered Tom DeLay's office, this was back some years ago, that they were day trading in the back room because Congress had carved out an exception for itself, and they can trade on inside information, members of Congress and their staff members, and without any penalties. And so they were doing it. And then he discovered a whole bunch of other Republican members of the House of Representatives, took it to Nancy Pelosi. She literally had no idea, was horrified, brought this to the floor and spoke about it. They passed a law to put an end to it. It got out of the House of Representatives. It was passed when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, and got over to the Senate, and it was filibustered by the Republicans. Why is this a partisan issue? Bradley Smith is with us, chairman and co-founder of the Center for Competitive Politics, former chairman of the Federal Election Commission. CampaignFreedom.org is the website. Bradley, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Jim. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's Tom. But I'll take it. I'll take it however I get.
Yeah, and it's funny because one thing I appreciate the fact that you, as I've told you before, you're one of my favorite guys because you actually have different views on and treat them well. So I like it.
Well, thank you. I know that the Center for Competitive Politics. One of the things, for example, that we disagree on is you think corporations should have the constitutional right of free speech to engage in political action because they're aggregations of persons, for example, and I disagree with that. And we can just leave that where it is. But why would we disagree on this?
Well, I don't know that we disagree, except for maybe some disagreement on particulars. For example, to be honest, I'm not really familiar with what was in the bill that was passed by the House and blocked.
It simply said that the standards for insider trading, the insider trading laws, that those standards, that there is no longer a congressional exemption from those standards, and the objection by the Republicans was that we handle so much business and so many things that we would have to put, pretty much all of us would have to put our money in blind trusts, which sounds reasonable to me. I mean, that's how it used to be. That's what, Dwight Eisenhower did.
Yeah, I don't think that that's necessarily a problem. In other words, if people want to go to blind trust, personally, I don't particularly have a problem with that. I think it's probably a good thing. What I would point out is that this is something that is sort of endemic to modern Congress, that when they say, oh, we have our hands in so many things, we always have conflicts of interest. In a sense, that's right, and it's one of the costs, I think, that goes with large government. I mean, you run into problems, you're going to start requiring, every staffer in Congress to do every investment, and it becomes very, very difficult for people to survive in that kind of environment.
Okay,
so my view is that Congress should be tighter about saying you're going to put your assets in blind trust. I think Congress should also be tighter about what spouses are doing. That is, we've had many cases where spouses of prominent congressmen and senators are actually lobbyists and going around lobbying. And, well, I'm just doing this on my own. Totally, nobody knows my spouse is, a very powerful senator. I don't think that should be tolerated either. But I point out that this is not a partisan issue either in the sense of who's doing it. I mean, you have people like Dianne Feinstein, whose husband has enormous contracts with the federal government. You have folks all through government who have, spouses who are working with government cases. When Tom Daschle was Senate Majority Leader, his wife was one of those people who was a lobbyist.
Yeah, and I can give you a list of Republicans who have done the same thing. If Phil Graham's wife, Wendy, was on the board of Enron, which is why we got the Commodity Futures Modernization Act and Graham Leach Bliley, which blew up Glass-Steagall and led right to the crash, and created a $700 trillion, gray market for commodities that never existed before 1999.
You said so much in there, I couldn't say that that's right, but I would have said that's right if you'd stopped just after, this is a Republican thing too, and use Wendy Graham as an example.
Sure, okay, but here you say it's because of big government. Government as a percentage of GDP in the United States is more or less 20%. I mean, our government spends a little over 20%, brings in a little under 20%, but it's roughly a fifth of our economy. It's more like 40% in Canada. It's well over 40% in most European countries. It's in the neighborhood of 50% in most of them. So if big government is the problem, why is it that we have this problem of corrupted politicians, and by and large those countries don't?
I would disagree with that supposition. I think if you look at most of those countries, if anything, the problem is worse, and it's so bad that people don't even think twice about it. The entwining of government and business in countries like France and much of Europe and Italy and so on is just astronomically bad. And again,
well, Italy, I'll give you. I think Berlusconi is a case in point.
This is a case in which it's not, to me. Let's put it this way. As I say, I think in the end, this is a side effect of big government. That is not, per se, an argument that we shouldn't have big government, right? I mean, there are downsides to having small government as well.
Well, isn't it an argument not
those are going to be there?
Yeah, isn't it an argument not for big or small government, but for an argument for ethical government? That if somebody wants to, serve the goddess of democracy, Columbia, if they want to come to the District of Columbia and serve the public, that there's a certain price to pay for that. You have to give up aggrandizement and self-wealth. I mean, Allison Grimes, who's going to be running against Mitch McConnell, just released an ad that basically raises the question, how is it that Mitch McConnell went off to Washington, D.C., not a millionaire, and is now a multimillionaire, and he gets a $160,000 a year salary? How'd that happen?
Well, we're going to find that from an awful lot of people in Washington, D.C. And I think that you're right. I think this is part of the long-term dissatisfaction with D.C. is this feeling that they operate as a separate, kind of group from the rest of us.
Yep.
When I was at the FEC, again, I was quite deregulatory generally, but one area where I was very tough was on the idea, again, of using campaign funds for personal use, that campaign funds had to be spent on a campaign. And I think, I used to say the same thing about the type of relationships we're talking about here. People would say, well, for example, why should my spouse have to give up his or her, business investments simply because I'm in the Senate? My response is, well, why should other Americans have to give up their speech rights simply because you're in the Senate? Right. If we're worried about corruption, let's put it on those members of Congress who are there. So I think that, you let off the segment by talking about the Keystone Pipeline. Again, that's not something where I can say that I know, the details about John Boehner's investments or anything else. The story's been out there for a long time. I presume that he has not violated any House or Senate rules.
No, it's not against the law what he's doing. In fact, it's something that pretty much, I have no idea what percentage of members of Congress do it, but it.
Well, and the big thing is that this is a bipartisan problem, and we should put tougher restrictions, I think, on members of Congress. But at some level, we are going to run into the problem that, there's an awful lot of people working up there now, and you've got all the folks in state government, and we have issues of just the connections people have with lobbyists and their hopes to get future jobs and future things to do. And I think when we look at all that, we also need to recognize that we shouldn't be too horribly cynical. That is, pretty much every Republican supports the Keystone Pipeline. I don't think you find very many that oppose it. I don't think there's any reason to believe that most of them think that the pipeline is a bad idea. I think most of them think it is a good idea and would support it anyway. Yeah. So it's very tough to disentangle, again, why people are acting in particular situations.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. But and what it does is it just takes us back to the more abstract issue, or the more solid issue, actually, of, what do we do about what appears to be corruption in government? Bradley Smith, chairman and co-founder of the Center for Competitive Politics, campaignfreedom.org, the website. Thank you, Bradley.
Thanks.
Good talking. We'll be back.